Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to resilience, business continuity, disaster planning, COVID, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community plan for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If there's a topic you'd like to talk about on the show, you'd like to be a guest, please feel free, send me an email. You can reach me through LinkedIn. I am the only Alex Fullick on LinkedIn, so I'm really easy to find. And the link is down in the video description. So please feel free, reach out, and we'll see about getting you on the show or finding someone else to come on the show and talk about what you'd like us to talk on. Coming up soon is the Disaster Recovery Journal Spring Conference. And today I have a special guest, someone who is one of the key sponsors. I'll let him talk about it. I'd like to welcome to the show the CEO of Fusion Risk Management, Mike Campbell. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alex. Good to be here.
Now, as I mentioned, DRJ Spring is coming up, and you're a big part of that.
DRJ does important work, and we're happy to play a small role in helping them continue to move the state of the art forward.
And I've seen you guys at the fall DRJ. As we were chatting beforehand, I knew I had met you briefly before, way back in 2019. Right. Boy,
back when we did things in person.
Yeah. Well, if I can do a live broadcast later this year, and you're there in Phoenix, then we'll get you to come back on. And we'll chat there. Now, I do have viewers and listeners around the globe. Can you take a minute or two and talk about yourself, what you do, and how you actually got into the industry?
Certainly. Mike Campbell, I'm the CEO here at Fusion Risk Management, operate out of Chicago, Midwest. We also have an office, our European headquarters in the UK. I joined Fusion a little over 2 years ago and came with an investment in the company by the Vista Private Equity Group. And they were brought in to help us accelerate the growth that we were already seeing, because the way that Fusion prepares for disasters, prepares to recover, is a very different animal than other places that we've seen. And they saw this as a unique and wonderful opportunity. And they showed me what they were seeing. And I said, I've got to join this group as well. It's quite an amazing team.
Well, I'll second that. I remember seeing Fusion in a small booth. Right. And now you guys are, you have the big booth.
Right. Well, it's been interesting because COVID has really changed a lot of things. And while we certainly we're not thrilled with the reason that people are starting to understand how we operate and why different is actually better here, we had been evangelizing our approach to risk management and disaster recovery for about a decade. And it takes some time because it's very different than the way the traditional business has been run, where you think more episodically. What is a plausible but remote opportunity that this thing is going to happen, and you put your energy around planning on that. Well, what COVID taught us instantly, it started as a employee health and safety issue, turned into work from home, which caused a complete meltdown of your systems because they weren't designed to run that way, changed your business operation. Then supply chains started to melt down. Then we had a financial collapse, right? So, and then while you're trying to get your handle on this, the West Coast gets hit by wildfires, the South gets hit by hurricanes. You start putting your plans to get back to the office and you get hit with social unrest. This has been a real eye-opener, not just to our industry, because we've always known that preparing for bad things, that's what we do. The eyes that were opened were the people who are running the business, who have been thinking a lot about, how do I make my business more efficient? And then once I've got that all laid out, how do I just go back and check? Did I leave any risk inherent in this structure? People don't think that way anymore. Everybody got hit by COVID and all the myriad disasters that followed. And they realize now, I think literally, gutturally, they believe that they've got to run their business with risk in mind, run their business, not just plan their business. And that's a holistic change. A complete change in the mindset of a lot of the folks on boards and in C-suites.
Why do you think it took so long for people to change their minds and view things? it's terrible to say, but did it take a 500,000 people, or I think it's you're over 500,000 people in the
Yep.
US, and over 2 million people around the globe. Did that have to happen before people start changing their mindset? Like what took them so long?
Well, people have very short memories, very short memories. And what this combination of a long-term chronic disaster peppered with sort of episodic disaster showed that these single plans are hopelessly incapable of handling that. The permutations of disasters. No one had a plan
Like
for this.
the scenario focus, like a flood, a
Exactly.
fire, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Right. Even a pandemic plan. I don't think anyone had a pandemic plan that factored in tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfires. That plan didn't exist. And the fact is, you can get hit by something. It can be big, but manageable, and then you forget. You just forget. But this was chronic and repeated, and just drove a lot of businesses to their knees for long periods of time, as we all know.
Mhm.
So this was a real learning for, I think, all industries and around the globe,
Do you think we're
and one that
still
won't soon be forgotten.
well, hopefully not. You did mention short memories there. We better not have short memories after this. If we do, you really don't deserve to be in business.
Exactly. Right. Right.
We were actually going to be talking about operational resilience today.
Right.
I know we got off on a different tangent there, but
Well,
I'm completely fine. I almost never stick to a script anyway. So,
but operational resilience is really the thought of how does it all tie together. So, for instance, when you look at the traditional way of planning for these disasters, not only are you doing them in these scenario bases, but you're doing them in a silo as well. You've got IT disaster recovery, you've got operational risk, which is largely a financial exposure, business continuity, which is operations, third-party risk, which goes to procurement sometimes, right? They're all part of the same risk. They're part of the same way you run your business. So as I said, the way we view this is, let's understand all the critical business processes that you have. Who's involved? What sites are involved? What systems do you use? What servers are those on? Where are those servers? Where are those sites? What third parties are critical to delivering this product or service to my end user? And that's what you're protecting. You're protecting the critical business service. The fact that all these pieces impact that means to do it effectively, you have to do it holistically. And that's what operational resilience is all about. Looking at your risk, your holistic risk, how it all ties together. And no matter what hits you, you have to keep delivering on your promise to your customers.
So what's the difference? Because I'm seeing these two terms show up everywhere: operational resilience and organizational resilience. What's the difference? Are they one and the same, or is it a verbiage difference? What's the
well, you're going to get a different answer from everybody you ask. But so with that caveat, operational resilience in our view is more laying out the process, making sure that you understand the role that all these elements play in how your business works. Taking it to another level, to organizational resilience, is getting the mindset in the heads of the people that are performing these functions, to know not just what are my required steps if A happens or B happens or C happens. It's a two-way street as well. Having people understand that managing through risk, managing through disaster is everybody's job. So you also need to make sure that you're hearing the voices coming back from the field, as well as issuing directions, asking for information. It's got to be a mindset. And that's really when you get into the organizational aspects of it. That people need to embrace risk, and managing through adversity is part of the way we run our business.
So does that mean organizational resilience contains soft skills?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because you mentioned
and a mindset.
communication. So that means, if I was with Fusion, I would have to be able to communicate with you or your colleagues, information. It's not just being pushed down. This is it. This is the way it is. There's got to be some soft skills so that I feel free to speak up and that kind of thing.
Well,
right?
And frankly, you need to take the risk mindset out of a single group or a single person in some companies, where you're building your supply chain back up, and you decide to single source something because you can get your widget for a penny less, it shouldn't just be some person whose job it is to think through, well, is it right to just single source that? What happens if you lose that supplier, right? Everybody needs to be thinking. It is all about, you've got to be efficient as well, but you have to think resilience. What happens if I make a decision? What could go wrong? If you get people thinking that way, then it's everybody is part of both the problem and the solution, right? Or the problem definition and the solution.
Two questions then. How do you get that mindset to change so that people start thinking and feel like they can point those kind of things out? And two, who owns that then? Because if you're not looking at things in silos anymore, you're trying to get rid of that. Because
right.
Let's face it, we've all worked everywhere where there's silo thinking all the time.
Right.
How do you go about changing that?
Well, that is happening because of what we're living through. What we're starting to see more and more are global chief resilience officers. Now, I will say that the banking community is definitely leading the charge. They were frankly heading down this path due to regulatory requirements before COVID even hit. But the concept of holistic risk management and operational resilience is now something that is coming up everywhere. Financial services, I think, will continue to lead the charge because the bullseye is so clearly drawn because of the regulatory involvement. But you're seeing it pop up, and we're seeing it pop up, certainly even in the non-regulated industries, where you'll find somebody in the organization is being endowed with the concept of breaking down the silos. Because remember, the silos were part of the problem. As these businesses started to unravel, as they started getting hit by more and more things, they realized, you can't, if you're really hit with something on the risk side, you're not just going to sit there and wait for an insurance check. You still have to run your business, right? So all these pieces are now intuitive. Everybody understands that they're connected. Getting them together is the tricky part. So we're seeing different kinds of people take on similar roles. And this is where it actually gets really fascinating too. It depends on the industry. Certainly, how badly were they hit by COVID? How quickly are they coming back? That really gauges your sensitivity to it and really your ability to execute against it. But it's also interesting because you'll see people put into the similar position, a chief resilience officer for whatever they call it, it's a chief resilience officer. But you'll find that their background, where they came from, still heavily skews what they think of the job, what they think the definition is of what they're trying to accomplish. So someone jumping into an operational resilience role from IT naturally starts thinking cyber, ITDR, right? Mm-hmm. It takes them a while to get out of their comfort zone because everyone's starting from a comfort zone. This is a new role. If you have someone who started with business continuity, trying to understand how you get these other people who are talking sort of the same way, but a different taxonomy, but getting them to think about how do you get things into a plan and act kind of a mentality. Again, you're coming with biases, you're coming with preconceived notions. And while I think everyone's going to start to converge on what operational resilience is, it certainly depends on where you start and how much energy your company is putting behind getting that convergence. So it's changing, day by day, but changing differently across different industries.
That's got to be a challenge because CRO comes along and says we're going to break down these silos, but you've got senior vice presidents and executives who have their I used to hear the word a lot, their empire,
right,
that they've built, and now they've got somebody else coming along saying you've got to change the way you're thinking. And it's not just that executive who has to change, but their direct reports and further down down the whole hierarchy line.
Right.
So there's got to be some significant challenges on trying to get that mindset to change. And I'm going to get to some other bits later, but just changing that mindset has got to be a huge challenge because it's not just a change in what they do, it's a change in how they do it and how they think.
That's true, but two things are helping to facilitate it. The most important one is nobody thinks they did a good job in their silo. Nobody. It just didn't happen. This was too much. It overburdened everybody's preconceived notions. So it's not like people are sitting back smug saying, well, I don't need to change, right? If anything, we all learned that there were shortcomings to the way that our silo thinking was driving us. The thing that's also helping is what I talked about really early on. This is not a hypothetical exercise. This is not every 6 months you get the C-suite in on a tabletop exercise, right? Where they all roll their eyes about, that'll never happen, right?
Oh, yeah, I've been in that.
They lived it day by day by day. Hell, they were talking about operational resilience on the Today Show for weeks. You've never heard it mainstream before like that. But the C-suite, the CEOs were living through these outrageous things that were happening to their business, feeling almost powerless, out of control. And that's something that people don't easily forget. And the thing that's also happening that's fascinating from our perspective is that boards of directors are getting involved now operationally, right? You've got the chairman of the risk committee. It was a very different animal than it is today, especially at the bigger customers. The board themselves are saying we can't not factor in risk in the way we run our business anymore. So they're getting direct operational reporting, as opposed to talking about the big risks or hypotheticals at a board level once a quarter. They all paid the price. We all paid the price for not being holistic and not being prepared. So we have, again, everybody felt the need for change, and there are people at the top who excruciatingly learned that they needed to have that visibility and capability of action.
And on that note, we've come to the end of our first segment. We are talking today with the CEO of Fusion Risk Management, Mike Campbell. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Today we are talking with Mike Campbell, CEO of Fusion Risk Management. Mike, great first segment. Lots of good information there. You mentioned learning from some of these episodes that occur. So what are your thoughts on after action reports and lessons learned, and how does that contribute to operational resilience or organizational resilience?
Oh, absolutely critical. Now, ideally, you'd be doing this through simulations, right? Trying to figure out where you're vulnerable or where things break in most of the scenarios, so you can, because you can't fix everything. You can't harden everything, as we all know. There's not infinite money. There are, however, infinite risks. One of the, if you can call it a benefit, I hesitate to call anything a benefit out of the pandemic, but if you want to know how your business breaks, look around your feet, because everybody's business broke. You want to know what was vulnerable? It's in pieces on the floor. So if you're not, as a business, going out right now and doing the after action reports, learning when every wave of another disaster comes through, if you're not monitoring, cataloging what broke, what were the implications, this is unfortunately probably your best opportunity to see where you are vulnerable systemically, because you broke, right? So let's not lose the lessons, the expensive lessons that are all around us in where you're vulnerable. And not just you, your supply chains, your critical partners. This all had a cascading effect. If you don't catalog what happened now, it'll be lost to history. We already talked about that. People tend to forget, especially difficult things. So now's the time to be cataloging what happened, so you can make sure that you're prepared for those kinds of breakages in the future. Again, you can't be thinking of this as, how do I plan for another pandemic followed by 16 other significant disasters? That's not the way to do it. Think about how your business operates. How did it break? Is it likely to break in similar ways again? Forget the cause. But if my supply chain is too precise, if it's not resilient enough, if certain business processes or certain sites are more heavily impacted, more regularly impacted, use this opportunity to say, now I know where to focus my hardening efforts, because I saw how things broke and I can see how they break. And it's a massively important set of lessons to be learned. And you paid the price. Let's get the value.
During our break, I was talking to you about my project management background with lessons learned. And it really frustrates me with lessons learned, because in project management and almost anything, it doesn't really get looked at, a lesson learned, until way down the road. Okay, what happened? When, as you said, people don't remember. You've got team members that have changed. They've moved on to another position, or they've left a company. They've taken that knowledge with them. There was no initial recording to start with of what the trigger was. And by the time you get to a lessons learned, it has no value anymore.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Which is a problem. However, I've never been through a project like this before, right? I think the only valid reason for not scribing this immediately is because you're still up to your neck in alligators, right? We have a lot of people in our line of work who've been scrambling to keep the lights on, to make sure that people are well, that our business is still operating. And it's very hard to catalog the lessons learned if you're still spinning the plates, right? But we have been through a lot. People are starting to come back. And you're absolutely right. Now's the time to get those lessons learned cataloged, because, like I said, they're hugely expensive lessons. They show you where your weaknesses are. It's not a hypothetical exercise anymore. If your business breaks the same way again, massively breaks the same way again, that would be a shame, is putting it lightly. That would be a crime.
But what's the expression? You're doomed to repeat history. If you don't learn from it.
For those who don't
Something
learn
along
from
that
it.
line.
Yep. Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
So it's rather interesting. You mentioned logging all of the lessons learned now and the action after action reports. And you also mentioned that with COVID, we had different disasters occurring.
Right.
So with operational resilience, how do you go about logging all these different things that can happen all at the same time? Because you've got COVID that hits you one way.
Right.
A week later, you could have an application issue. A week after that, you could have something else. Excuse me. How do you go about capturing all these lessons learned? Because sometimes there is, and as you mentioned, there's more than one incident happening at a time, that people just don't get confused.
Right.
I'm all confused. I don't know what to capture, but let's just keep going.
Here's the mindset change. And you actually just illustrated it, because you're not trying to say, let's document what hit us and then therefore what happened. How did your business break? It doesn't matter what caused it to break, right? So you're never going to see this same series of failures happen again. But if you can go back in and say, well, all of a sudden my sites were useless to me, so my sites can all go down. What did I have to do? Well, you needed to know where everybody was. Can they continue to do their jobs? Are you planning now for whatever causes a site to go down? It doesn't matter what the input is. It matters what the reaction is, right? How do I make sure I track and compensate for sites going down, areas being cut off, like in Texas for a week? Again, planning for an ice storm in Texas, it gives you an output. Losing a region, doesn't matter what causes it, right? What do you do when you lose a region? How big a region? What's in it, right? So again, you're going back to the mindset of, here's how my business works. Any element can break for whatever reason. Multiple things can break. You can break, like in my example, myself, I was watching my executive dashboard, and I had set it up to be looking at my sites, because I like to keep track of input data, active shooter elements, weather, all the inputs that you want to make sure you're monitoring for. And I said, well, I had to shut the office again because in Chicago there was civil unrest, and obviously the little bit of back to the office that we had to stop. But I said, okay, I'm looking at my business wrong again. So I said, I'm going to stop. I don't care about sites. I'm going to look at where my employees are working from. Boom. But now my system was already monitoring it, but now I'm looking at all my individuals. If you're working out of a cabin in the North Woods, I know where you are and I can monitor you, right? So that's what you want to do. You want to make sure that you're understanding how your business is working, what threats happen, and what happens if a server goes down, what happens if a group gets missing. It could be a hurricane, it could be a tidal wave, it could be a wildfire. The input itself is sort of secondary. If you understand how your business works and how it breaks and how you can harden it, that's what you need to learn. So, and every business broke. So that's what you want to go back and catalog. What happened when everybody had to go back to work, had to work from home? There were a lot of things that broke. Make sure you remember all of them.
Who gets involved with that?
It depends on what it is. I mean, you're going to have the IT folks involved in in making sure you don't lose the ability to operate from home. We personally had some problems with because we do this for a living, right? We just a couple months before this, we sent everybody home for a week with no notice, and we said, you got to keep running the business, which you'd expect of a company in our line of work. But when we did that, everything on our side worked seamlessly. But a couple of our vendors, like Zoom, didn't work so well at first, right? So again, that's not a lesson you would be able to learn easily, to know that you have to maybe have alternate plans, alternate venues to see if you can share the load, because things broke that you wouldn't have anticipated. That's what you want to remember.
Right, because your planning sometimes, and you mentioned earlier, is so focused on a single scenario,
Right.
You've developed all these assumptions that over time people just think are true and don't even look at them as potential risks anymore.
Right, exactly. And now let's give you another example. So looking at the care of your employees in a distributed environment, that was something nobody was thinking about. How do you make sure that people are staying connected, they're staying productive, they're staying healthy in a distributed environment where you become much more than compatriots, much more than just working colleagues. You become a community. So a lot of people had to build skills there. On the HR department, in senior executives, all needed to take a very different and more understanding view of the new reality they were in, and for a long time, right? It wasn't just how do we get through this week so everybody's going to be okay. It's how do I get through this month? And by the way, there are people protesting outside the windows of some of our workers. How do we support them? How do we keep them emotionally whole as well? It was a very different business problem than I think certainly I had ever experienced, I think for most people. So again, learning from those things in difficult environments, what skills were needed, what approaches were needed, what did you do before? And then frankly, the other thing to be learning, going off on a bit of a tangent, a lot of really good stuff came out of this. I mean, people did amazing things. And to lose that would be a shame as well, because we could all go back to the office, 3 weeks from now, whenever we hit herd immunity, and lose the ability to truly incorporate people who are going to stay remote, right? Don't do that. So let's learn the lessons that we've learned. Let's keep the good stuff that we had to improvise and use that to make ourselves stronger, more resilient, and frankly, a better place to work going forward.
I agree. It's interesting you mentioned some people that will probably stay home. I know people that would prefer to stay home now because after a year, they've gotten used to being at home. They're set up. They're finding themselves more productive. They're spending more time with family, and especially if they've got kids, they're seeing them off to school. They're home when they come home from school. They're spending more time with their partners. They're going outside, walking their dogs, at lunchtime. And there are those that, want to be back in the office as well. So you've got all kinds of people that want to do different things. I think that that normal 9 to 5, get up, catch a train, go to the office, catch a train, go home, may not be as a working option as it once was.
Right. Well, and should it be? I had someone look at me almost with tears in their eyes, and they said, "Mike, I know we're getting closer to going back to the office. I got a 45-minute commute each way. I can't go back to that." And why would you want to have a person spend an hour and a half just in transit every day? A lot of companies, I think most companies were afraid of the work from home movement because it really was picking up steam before COVID. And frankly speaking, I was nervous about it too, because it's very hard to measure productivity. It's hard to measure what you're losing, what you're gaining. But this sort of jump into the deep end of the pool, what I learned is you get too much productivity, particularly in this case, because you can't have people go out and do anything. There's nothing else to do. So we found people just putting in too much time. And then we try to get them to take vacation. And they'd say, I can't take vacation because everyone is still working. And if I come back, I take Friday off, I come back on Monday, I've got 100 more emails I've got to go after. During the summer last year, we had to take turns shutting the company down, except for critical people, because we are in an important line of work. But we had to shut the whole company down on Fridays so people would feel comfortable even taking an extra day. So productivity was too high. We're trying to encourage people to find ways to reconnect with family, to to get out of their minds a little bit, get out of the work environment a little bit, and try to recoup, right? Because it can be exhausting being on and being this productive.
How how does that new paradigm, people working at home, how is that challenging operational resilience?
Well,
Because operational resilience, I think a lot of people would think facility, everybody in the building, but
yep, but
like you
it's
just said,
not,
that's not the
right?
same now.
Exactly. So what you need to be able to have is a way of monitoring the sites, because a lot can happen to a site that impacts everyone in the site. So it's clearly something you want to monitor, but you can't stop monitoring where the individuals are. Just embrace the fact that you're going to have nodes and spots, right? You're going to have individuals that are key parts of your critical business processes, and the sites are now going to again be part of your critical business services. But what you have to do too, obviously, there's part of it. It's an IT environment where you make sure, as we have, that all of our conference rooms, all of our internal offices have video conferencing capabilities, so you can be both in person and have the Zoom call going at the same time to get that telepresence feel. So it's a different infrastructure. It's certainly much better connectivity than we had before, much higher speeds, so we can get high resolution, real time. So those are sort of the obvious things. But then you want to make sure that you're continuing to monitor, your business as it morphs, because it will change. Some days the site is going to be the most important thing, but other days when people are not coming to the site, you maybe have Fridays where everybody works from home. You still need to be able to run your business and make sure you're monitoring for threats and issues.
Is that a challenge also with third parties? Because at the very beginning, we were talking about supply chain there for a bit. If you, let's say Fusion, or even me, we're changing the way we do things. That's got to change the way our suppliers and vendors and clients and partners are going to be operating too. Is there an additional challenge when it comes to operational resilience now that they are changing as well, we're changing?
Right. Well, and I think we've got a new level of appreciation of the role that these partners play. In a lot of cases, the real-time role that they play. And it's not just our third parties, it's their third parties, right? We saw it all come crashing down in fits and starts. And so again, a very important lesson learned. The cyber attacks, for Pete's sake, solar winds, all these things are teaching us that you need to be able to monitor in real time what's happening with your third parties and your end parties. And it's not enough anymore to get even a 600-page questionnaire answered. It doesn't help you when a hack.
I remember those.
Right? And that's been the mindset. That's been the way we've been doing things. And you have to do that. And here's the difficult part. You have to be much more tightly integrated. So if something happens, the potential damage can be understood and action can be taken faster. But that's difficult for the third party who's in a potential position of liability, right? How do you force more closeness when people are trying to protect themselves more? But again, this pandemic, I think, has been a huge lesson, coupled with all the other things that have hit during it, to say it's inevitable. We have to be much more tightly integrated. If something bad happens in one of your suppliers, they need to be able to tell you right now, and your systems need to be able to say, something bad's happening here. What are the ramifications? Tell me what's the most important thing that's going to hit me the hardest, what's going to have the biggest impact, and what are your recommended actions, and who's in charge, right? You've got to be able to do it real time. And that's really operational resilience as well. It's not just the preparation, although that's key. It's the incident management, it's the command and control, it's gathering as much data as you possibly can, making very quick decisions, and then having that also be the mechanism for implementing and following up. Did we do what we said we had to do? Did we lock down what we needed to lock down? It's got to be much more of a command and control mentality. And third parties are going to have to play that, or they can't play, right?
Yeah. Does that mean some, the new NDA or new SLA agreements have to be put in place, like changing that whole view? It's just, I'm your sole supplier, and thou shalt buy from me. And that's
undoubtedly, a lot of that groundwork's going to have to change. But I think it's going to become easier and more understandable when more companies get a true operational platform for managing risk, managing incidents, right? So as soon as you've got in your organization, say like one of the big banks, you've got something that's monitoring all my IT issues, my people issues, my site issues, my personnel issues, and it's doing all that real time. You're getting the instant feeds, and then anything that comes at you, the system can, as I've said, tell you what the biggest impact's going to be. What should you be looking at first? At what level in the organization? As soon as you have that in any organization, one, the need for third parties to be part of it becomes absolutely critical. But if that platform exists and you have it at your third party, the platforms can talk, right? So in fact, one of the things that the banking is going to need to be doing is simulations. So, and a simulation is not just, here's a financial condition, give me some spreadsheets that tell me you're going to survive the other side. It's, I'm going to give you a scenario that says hurricanes in the south, fires in the west, 20% of your units go offline. Go. Tell me that you're still going to be able to have someone swipe a credit card and it's going to be approved, right? So you can't do that by yourself. It has to be real time, real simulation, where it goes down and it tests your critical suppliers, your critical third parties, and they come back with I'm good, I'm gone, I'm degraded, right? And you can play the scenario out as though they're part of the true ecosystem, because they are part of the true ecosystem. Yeah. It's just making sure that you have systems in place to monitor. If everyone has systems in place to monitor, react appropriately, those systems connecting is actually fairly straightforward.
I remember doing some of those simulation tests, and we had nearly 200 people, 3 different countries and 5 locations involved, and UK, Canada, and the US. And boy, was that a challenge sometimes, and it was amazing to find out how many assumptions were actually built into things you didn't even know that were there. Right. People in the UK, well, we just assumed we would get such and such in XYZ format. Well, no, we just rebuilt our mainframe. Until something else comes up, you're getting it in this format. What do?
Right.
You got the right information. It just doesn't look the same.
and as we've all learned, you really rather find those things out in a simulation than in the real thing.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I saw that as a positive. Finding that out then was a positive.
Absolutely. And who knows how long memory will actually serve for this. I'm thinking this is a DNA changer. But I don't think we're ever going to go back to a point where people are rolling their eyes saying, why are we planning this? This would never happen. I don't think that's going to happen. Certainly not in the next generation, right? They're all going to say, yeah, let's test it again. We didn't do so well on that one. Let's test it again.
Yeah, let's see
right?
If we can do better.
and that goes back to the organizational resilience, right? You've got people who get it. Get it. We've got to be prepared for these things.
And on that note, we've come to the end of our second segment. We are talking with Mike Campbell, CEO of Fusion Risk Management. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Today we are talking with Mike Campbell, CEO of Fusion Risk Management. Mike, lots of great information. I really like chatting like this. I think it's really great. You talked about decision-making. And traditional decision-making, and I'm sure you've been in these situations too. People are in a boardroom and they have umpteen dozen meetings just to make a decision. Even a decision that needs to be made right away always seems to take a long time. With operational resilience, you mentioned that with some of the mechanisms, if you have in place with operational resilience, you can make faster decisions, better decisions. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit more on the decision-making process with regards to operational resilience?
Absolutely. In fact, that's been one of the most fascinating changes I think that's happened, is this connection between the C-suite and the board level with needing to know what's happening, needing to make sure that if there's a big decision that needs to be made, it's made by the appropriate person in the appropriate amount of time, just as you said. So, but it plays against sort of the traditions of our industry, where we want to get as much information as we can before we tell anybody that there's a problem, right? Mm-hmm. When big things hit, though, now there's the expectation. The board expects the C-suite and the CEO to be on top of things real time and prioritize the big decisions and make those big decisions fast to minimize damage and to take advantage of whatever timing that they need. So it's been a little bit of a push versus pull. And so what we're trying to make sure that we enable, there are thousands of things that can come up every day in any kind of business, particularly on the IT side with so much automated feeds. You're constantly under attack. Things are flipping from red to, or green to red all the time. So you don't want to send 1,000 or 10,000 incidents up to your C-suite. So you've got to have thresholds. Who has what decision rights? What needs to be escalated? Just raw. I mean, if it's existential, you've got to get to the CEO, maybe even the board, real time. And you need to show up with as much information as you can, and preferably a recommended action. And who should you call to get more input, more real-time input? In fact, hell, hit a button and I want a team to assemble to make this big decision with me. So those are the kinds of mechanisms that are coming into place now. And as I said, the real problem is not technology. It's not the filtering. It's not even coming with the best next action. It's getting people comfortable operating in an environment where people higher up are going to have as much information as you at the same time, and they're going to be calling saying, I need more, right? So how do you make sure your systems are giving as much information as possible that is focused and on the right thing? So I'm going to give the CEO anything that's above $500 million of potential impact. I'm going to give them the background information, the reason that we're concerned. I'm going to present it to them in a business tone, not in necessarily our jargon, our vernacular. And I'm going to try to give it to him or her in a way that's understandable and actionable. And if you don't do it, here are the ramifications, right? So we've got to understand that we live in a world where there's a new expectation. I don't want a team to think about this for a week and present me some presentation, right? This stuff happens real time. So let's get systems in place that can pull the data from external sources, that can measure it against where we think our pain points are and our tolerance levels are and our impact is going to be, and then know who supports these decisions, who's in charge of executing once the decision is made. You've got to put the decision maker with the correct person doing the execution real time, right? And all that is, again, straightforward from a technology perspective. It's more difficult from a historic perspective, from a policy perspective, right? Getting people comfortable that that's the world we live in, but it is here.
Is it also empowering individuals as well? Because you mentioned over $500 million or something like that. Empowering people further down the chain, like, oh, this is only a $50,000 impact. For some people, obviously that's a huge amount, but for multi-conglomerates, it's like not even a blink. But to empower somebody who can make that decision related to something on that level, do you also empower further down the chain on these different levels?
Excellent point. And there are two fundamental ways that this is empowering. I'll try to be quick. I know we're short on time. One is to come up with those decision rights. Who has the appropriate level of authority to make a decision? The fundamental problem is still there. What data do I give them? What alternatives do I present? How do we execute the decision, right? So yes, with decision rights, you can make sure that you've got the right person getting the right information for the right level of decision. What's even more important is the people in our business. We're being empowered, right? More than ever before. People at the board level are asking us, what should we do? This is an opportunity that comes along once in a lifetime. People get what we do now, why it's important, hell, why it's critical, right? And if you're not part of the conversation, how long? Yeah, exactly. If you're not part of the conversation already, get yourself in the conversation, because it's happening. It's happening at the board level. It's happening in the C-suite. We are where the questions get formed. We're where the action plans get devised. We're the ones that do all the scenario setting, where we pull all this together. We're in the eye of the storm here, and this is an opportunity to take our seat at the C-suite table and make sure that we are protected going forward. This is, again, once in a generation opportunity. We need to step up, because we're the ones that have been living in this environment the longest. We know what we need to do. And now we have people who are not only listening, they're screaming, help us. Great opportunity. Talk about empowerment.
Almost makes you want to say, I told you so. But we're not going to go there. We won't go there.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, probably not.
Yeah. We only have 3.5 minutes left. Do you want to take a couple of minutes and give some final thoughts on operational resilience?
Well, sure. Probably the most important thing is, especially for your audience, this is a pivotal time. There are conversations going on in every boardroom about what we do, and we need to step up. We need more. People are listening. They understand what we do, why it's important. It's time to step up and make sure that we're part of that conversation. And we have to stop thinking in silos. It's not a silo game anymore. It's holistic. It's not going to be easy for us because a lot of us grew up in silos. A lot of us continue to operate in silos, right? We need to know that the game has changed. And if we can't change with it, we're holding it up. So while there's a huge opportunity, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's going to happen. And I think this is, again, an opportunity that are going to make a lot of careers right now, because I think the vacuum of leadership has been palpable. And we have a lot of people in this industry who know what's needed and know how to get things done. And the opportunity's there. But don't wait for someone to knock on the door.
Yeah.
Go barge through it.
Just a quick answer. Do you think that the challenge we have of buy-in is gone?
Gone. Absolutely. People are hungry for solutions to this. We're still living with the pain.
Yeah, it better be gone after this. If you're still hunting for buy-in, then I think maybe like what you said earlier on, people are not learning. You haven't learned anything.
Exactly. And if you're operating in the same way you always have pre-pandemic, you're not part of the solution.
Yeah.
Right.
We're the other part of that.
Hope I didn't tick anybody off.
Thanks a lot. I really enjoyed chatting with you today. And
thank you very much, Alex.
If we're able to do a live broadcast at DRJ in the fall, fingers crossed, let's hope something happens. Hopefully I can run into you. We can actually talk.
I look forward to it.
And I'll get you to come on the live broadcast as well.
Great.
But thanks very much. I really appreciated your time.
I enjoyed it. Good to see you again.
And to everybody listening and watching, thanks for listening and watching. And if there's a topic you'd like us to talk about, please feel free, reach out. Alex Fullick on LinkedIn. I'm the only one there. In the meantime, stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave a message and let me know what your thoughts are. If you'd like to be a guest on the show to talk about something related to business continuity, disaster management, COVID, personal well-being, anything that's relatable to those subjects, you can reach me through my LinkedIn profile, which is in the video description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. In the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.